bandwidth, some wise words to work with. And today I want to talk to you about some of the things I found on social media and why when you're looking on social media to help you deal with toxicity and bullying, you should really proceed with caution. So one of the things that I've noticed when it comes to social media and people talking about toxicity and bullying is that they sort of intermingle and intermix all the sorts of toxicity. So let's parse that out. First off, there's all sorts of toxicity. And you can have toxic people in your personal life, in your family. You can meet toxic people when you go shopping or you go out and about. And you can also have toxicity when you're at work. And even just those areas, there are lots of different forms of toxicity in all of those areas. Okay, so if you're looking at toxicity at work, you can have mild toxicity to extreme toxicity like workplace bullying, sexual harassment, discrimination, and everything in between. Okay, the other thing that I've noticed is that there's a lot of one size fits all solutions to your problem. Okay. And you need to proceed with caution about that, especially if you're dealing with extreme toxicity like workplace bullying. Okay. There isn't a one size fit all because if there was, I would have adopted it, you would have adopted it, and we would probably, hopefully, have solved our problems. Okay, so there's not a one size fit all. Every situation of workplace bullying is unique to who you are, to your workplace, and unfortunately, to your workplace bully and or bullies. Okay, so there's a lot of this kind of stuff in social media when it comes to toxicity and workplace bullying. Just use this phraseology, and it'll fix all your situations with toxicity. So I've used this sentence when I'm dealing with toxicity, and that has decreased the toxicity in my life. Okay. And that's great. But dealing with the workplace bullying and someone who is toxic occasionally in your workplace are not the same thing. Okay. So you really have to proceed with caution. Now, you certainly can try things, and that's great, but there isn't one thing that's going to fix your issues with toxicity and not with workplace bullying because it's a systematic problem. So instead of using a phraseology to fix your issue with workplace bullying, what I recommend first off, at the foremost, first thing you must do is this. You really have to collect data, even though you think you know the types of bullying that's happening, and you do, I'm sure you do. It's better to do some formal documentation to really give you a good idea of what's happening to you. Because one of the things that I know, having been a victim of workplace bullying, when you're in that situation and you're being bullied, you are often very, very concerned about what is happening to you and you want to get it to stop. And so a lot of times, even when we're in the moment, we're not really objectively consuming or taking in what's happening. And what I mean by that, let me break that down a little bit because I know that wasn't very clear, is when I was being bullied or when maybe you're being bullied, you're emotionally charged, okay? And documenting helps us take down the details that we might miss unless we were systematically documenting. So for example, the date, the time, who was present, the location, what was the trigger event, what did they say, what did you say, how did everybody else respond, right? That's what we really need to include when we document. And I know you think that's a lot of information, and you're absolutely right. But why are all those things are important? Let me tell you. First off, how the trigger event is always important because that sometimes will help you prepare for when bullying is going to happen. Okay, there's not a pattern to bullying, but a lot of times there are triggering events that we can predict we might be stepping into a bad situation. When other people are around and how they react, that's important for developing strategic allies later, okay? And who you might be able to trust, who you can't trust, okay? How the bully reacts, of course, is important. What they say is important. That's important for your planning to how you respond, okay? How you react is also important. Because one of the things in retrospect, when I go back and look at how I responded to workplace bullying, I actually made it worse for myself. So I was often engaging in back and forth with the bully because I was trying to prove my point. I was right, okay, and they were wrong. They were bullying me, but I would engage in that back and forth, which enhanced and increased my bullying. Okay, so all of those things in that documentation are good for you to see objectively so that you can plan your interventions accordingly. Okay. And I don't recommend having a phraseology in your toolbox. I recommend having lots of different strategies in your toolbox that you can pull out and try. For example, you might have some phraseologies in your toolbox. Okay. One of the things that I recommend when it comes to communication, and this has been has worked well for me. There's no key phraseology, but it's a method. You can call it the sandwich method or whatever it is. It's where you say something neutral, kind of positive. You say something kind of curt and to the point, what you want to say, and then you cushion it again with something positive, right? So there's a sandwich there. For example, I use this technique all of the time when I was working with people who were bullying me, and they almost never came back at me with something harsh because I shut them down. Let me give you a good example. So let's say that the bully comes after me and says, I didn't do my job, and they think that I'm a horrible person. Okay. I'm just making this up, of course, as we go. So I'm going to say, well, you know what, Barb, I hear what you're saying. I think that's an interesting point when you're talking about my work ethic. I am a good worker, and I've been here for, 3 years, shown up for 40 hours a week. My evaluations are positive, but I understand where sometimes you might have a viewpoint where my work ethic isn't as great. Okay. That's not the best example, but you can see where you say, I hear what you're saying. Okay. I understand your point. That's a good active listening. Okay. What it means to tells the bully you're listening. And then you say, but I don't agree with you, but you've made an interesting point. Okay. And why that technique is important is because when you cushion those things with sort of semi-positive things or active listening, it's much harder for the bully to respond and react to you. Let me give you an example of where a bully can come after you. Let's say again that Barb says to me, she doesn't like my paperwork. Okay. And I said, well, Barb, my paperwork is fine. I've never had any complaints about my paperwork. That defensive mode of communication that I just displayed, what that says then is Barb can say, well, come after me, right? But when you use the cushion or the sandwich method of communication, it's much less harder for them to come at you. Okay. It doesn't mean that they can't or they won't, but you haven't placed yourself in a defensive or vulnerable position. And so when you're not in that vulnerable defensive position, it's harder for a bully to come after you. So I recommend, again, having a lot of strategies like that in your toolbox. What I used to tell students when I was teaching social work is because sometimes we just don't know what to say. You know what? If we don't know what to say and you want to think about your response, what you can use is this technique. I hear what you're saying. Can you elaborate on that? Okay. Can you explain that to me? Or you can just say back to them what they said. Okay. So what I hear you saying is that you think my paperwork isn't very good. Okay. And you can, that is called active listening. You're just affirming what they've said. You are just repeating, regurgitating, for lack of a better term, exactly what they said. But those things don't put bullies on the mode to attack you. Those are more neutralizing responses. So instead of having a one size fit all, what I recommend you do is you document, and I've updated my documentation template, and I'll put that link down below, is you document and get a good idea for a couple of weeks is what is happening to you. And then go through that objectively. And when I say go through it, I mean compile all of that data. How many verbal assaults did you experience? How many emails did you receive? How many times were you left out of the loop so you weren't able to do your job? So that you really get a good understanding of what's happening to you. Then you identify those high risk times. For me, I was really bullied via email. I was really bullied in faculty meetings. And those were the times I needed to develop strategies to better manage the bullying. And not only did I develop strategies, but I prepared myself emotionally for those times when I was knew I was going to be bullied. And that's what I recommend. Instead of a phraseology that won't fix anything, right? What you need to do if you really want to manage workplace bullying, get a good understanding of what's happening to you, and then develop several strategies that you can use that you have in your toolbox or in your backpack that you can pull out. Because just like you, the workplace bully doesn't rely on one strategy. So they will come after you in different ways when they realize that you have subdued their workplace bullying. Okay, they have a lot of things in their backpack too. And we have to be able to curb those things. And so we have to have a lot of strategies in our toolbox as well. And if you're interested in learning more about how you can better manage workplace bullying, please go ahead and email me at jan@stopbullyculture.com.